Yes, because you notice I didn't say I'm passionate about tech. I'm not a techie, but I am using tech to achieve the goal that I want in health and wellness. So the way I entered into this space was actually through my own personal journey, and it was going from my own business, which was in a health space, a health centre by the beach, and I had a great lifestyle, into corporate life, which for me was a bit of a shock on many levels. But one of the big shocks for me was the environment of being in sort of white walls and fluorescent lights and stuck in there all day. And in that space, I was in an environment that was quite stressful. One could say potentially toxic. But I found when I was in that space, I meditated and I had my routines, but I just couldn't switch off in that environment. And I ended up collapsing from workplace stress in this one workplace. And the only way that I found I could relax was to have a multisensory approach using LED lights and flicker effect to take me into trance, listen to music, smell, sense, and hit myself from every sense with something to make me relax and try and control the anxiety and the symptoms of stress.
Hi, Smart Community friends. In this episode of the Smart Community Podcast, I have a great conversation with Edwina Griffin, founder of AtOne, which is an immersive meditation experience using the AtOne app and a virtual reality headset. Edwina tells us about her background in the health and wellness space, her passion for a healthy work culture, and what a smart community is to her. Edwina then shares with us how her wellness journey inspired her to get into the tech space before telling us all about her company AtOne and what is involved when using the products. We then chat about Edwina's transition into the tech space to develop her company and how important it was during this time to surround herself with the right people, as well as some of the lessons learned in the early stages of building her company. She also tells us about the amazing support she received from the tech community to develop a successful product and business. Edwina then dives a bit deeper into the AtOne product and explains how individuals and companies can benefit from the products before discussing the underutilization of smell and how it can trigger relaxation and meditation memory. We finish our conversation discussing the emerging trends of artificial intelligence and machine learning and the potentials of what can be created in smart communities. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the smart community, smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hello, Edwina. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks, Zoe. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm so excited just to dive straight in, but we'll lift out a little bit first. Let's talk about you. Tell us about your background and what you are passionate about.
Sure. It's always great to talk about what we're passionate about. So my background, my whole career has pretty well been in the health and wellness space. So at 21, I set up my first sort of fitness centre and had different sort of centres and gyms for 18, 19 years. And then I moved into the corporate space for a little while in franchise, and then into corporate training in wellness and health and mediation, conflict resolution in workplaces. So I guess I'm passionate about having healthy culture, connecting in healthy, sort of mindful communication, I guess, is probably a big thing. And self-awareness, group awareness. So for me, that's mental, physical, emotional health.
And we will dive in a bit deeper into obviously what you do in your company, but let's go up again and just talk about smart communities. And what is a smart community to you?
To me, a smart community is a community that is really easily accessible. It's connected. It's a great place to be, to like connect with the land and feel a part of the community easily, I guess, is the way I see it. And using technology to do that is kind of the way I see it as well. So I think it's using technology to our advantage so that we're getting the best out of everything we can.
So your background in health and wellness, and then, you've moved into this kind of tech space as well, or using tech as a tool to kind of help you achieve some of those goals and outcomes. Can you tell us a bit about how you came to be in this space?
Yes, because you notice I didn't say I'm passionate about tech. I'm not a techie, but I am using tech to achieve the goal that I want in health and wellness. So the way I entered into this space was actually through my own personal journey, and it was going from my own business, which was in a health space, a health centre by the beach, and I had a great lifestyle, into corporate life, which for me was a bit of a shock on many levels. But one of the big shocks for me was the environment of being in sort of white walls and fluorescent lights and stuck in there all day. And in that space, I was in an environment that was quite stressful. One could say potentially toxic. But I found when I was in that space, I meditated and I had my routines, but I just couldn't switch off in that environment. And I ended up collapsing from workplace stress in this one workplace. And the only way that I found I could relax was to have a multisensory approach using LED lights and flicker effect to take me into trance, listen to music, smell, sense, and hit myself from every sense with something to make me relax and try and control the anxiety and the symptoms of stress. So what that did for me was really show me that even though I'd meditated at that point for about 15 years, I still under stress couldn't do it. And so from that, I then went, well, hold on, I'm not the only person who gets stressed in these workplaces. What can we do to help people? Because basically the solution I was told at the time was go into a room and just relax in there. There's our quiet room. And I was in this fluorescent lit, white walled, tiny box, cubicle going, and you're telling me to relax in here? So that's what inspired me to create my tech product, which is virtual reality meditation, so that you can be in nature and I can pretend or feel. Actually, it's not pretend because you feel like you are at the beach or in the mountains while I'm sitting in that white-walled office in that stark environment. I have no control over. I have to be there. So it enabled me to feel like feel other people to feel like they're in another place. And then the other great thing about tech is then we can also get data on, not only measuring the heart rate and that education piece so people can see the results, but also for companies to get data on staff to see if they are really stressed, because there's self-assessment and things within that. So I think it brings in both things, that you can bring another world into that environment. And to me, that's where the smart city link comes in, and also the data that is generated from that.
Yeah, okay. So tell us about your company. Let's go there, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that some of the insights you're getting from this data already.
Sure. So the company is AtOne Australia, and the AtOne product is a virtual reality meditation, which we are bringing into companies and elite sporting groups, jails, schools. It's actually the audience is quite wide, because there's particularly, I think, after COVID, people are more aware of the mental health issues that go on, and there's no longer is anxiety and stress kind of a hidden conversation. It's quite an open, on the table thing that everyone is recognizing and talking about, thankfully. So the product is very much targeting that and helping people and working with people with disabilities and people who can't access some of the locations that are in the headset. So it provides those solutions of, targeting stress, but also high performance. So it's mindset training. It's that repetitive thought process of neuroplasticity. So our companies develop the tech, and we also do workplace training to support that. So it's still about the wellness piece, training on resilience and communication and things that support it, and an understanding of why meditation, what are the benefits and all of those things. So that's predominantly what it is, and the data that the individual gets and the company gets with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, like you said earlier on, you're not a techie, which I also love talking to people that aren't in tech, because the smart community space needs a whole bunch of different thinkers and how this all comes together. But, you came up with this idea. Can you take us a little bit through the process of how you had this idea and then you went, oh, okay, I could actually develop this into some kind of product? I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and startups on the podcast as well, because I see the parallels with smart cities, because it's about, and smart communities, it's about thinking differently and then going, oh, I can imagine that the impossible, essentially, because right now it's not a thing that happens. So can you take us through that journey a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the experience I spoke about where I used LED lights was about 8 years ago. So virtual reality wasn't accessible at that time. I mean, it was accessible at a very high price. So it wasn't a realistic option. So it's not an idea that I just popped up with last year. I've been sitting on the concept since then, so about 7 or 8 years, and initially was enthralled with brainwave technology and was looking at brainwave measurements, and that was initially my intention. what we did find in that, I then explored that for a little while, was the data wasn't reliable enough unless we had a full cap on. So I guess one of the learnings through moving into a tech space is me having to try and learn to understand, the validity of different technologies for what my intention is and the market. So obviously when we're working with elite athletes and top companies and executives, they need reliable data. So that was a initial journey in the stage of this business that was early on, that we'd spent a lot of time importing different brainwave sensors and measuring and testing a lot of that and finding that wasn't such a good option. I initially started this journey, so I guess this time, about 18 months ago, and I rented my house out to get the money to be able to start with a developer to get a prototype together. I had no idea. The challenge, I guess, is when you're not from a tech space is I obviously tried to surround myself with friends who are. Thankfully, I've got some friends who are in the tech space. However, you just don't know what to ask. You don't know what you don't know. And I think that's been the challenge. We're onto our third developer. And I think that's around the fact that even though I had a couple of friends on calls initially in those stages, that's been a big learning in terms of just knowing what to ask. And an important piece in that was data. Thankfully, I had a friend who's very involved in data at high levels in tech. So she was involved in a lot of conversations on that, which was a really important piece for me to understand when we're dealing with people's data. So anyway, we got the prototype and I went to my first big meeting. With a large corporate, into the boardroom with head of tech, head of company, big opportunity through someone I knew. And of course, I'd given the developer, this is the first developer, a week's heads up that I had this big meeting and it was a huge opportunity. It was going to be rolled out throughout the country and then if that worked internationally. So it was a big break for a little startup. And of course, I'm in the taxi on the way to the meeting, still waiting for them to give me the latest version because wasn't working. I'm literally in the taxi and I'm not exaggerating. I can't believe this is happening. So of course I go into the meeting having not really tested it because it literally loaded as I got out of the cab. I'm sitting in the foyer letting it finish load. And I got upstairs into this boardroom with these senior executives, one who's the head of tech for this international company. And it doesn't work. Nothing works. It's kind of jumping around. None of it worked. And it was probably the worst meeting of my career, but also was a good kick up the butt of, okay, and they were really lovely about it because I think they knew how humiliating it was for me. And from that, they did give me other suggestions for developers. It wasn't all bad. They were very supportive of the situation. Obviously, they're not clients yet, so we're only there now to go back into meetings. But that was a big learning for me and a real kick up there where I had to get out of my own way and just go, okay, well, it's not about you. That was the most humiliating meeting ever. What are you going to do now? Change developer. And then, learning that to then go, okay, we need to get to next level. So that involved an investor. So then, then it was about getting all the numbers together, getting everything together. And I guess in that, in that first version, I've written all the meditations. I'm a hypnotherapist and a meditation teacher, but it was very much me, recorded everything, did everything, and the quality sound, everything had to get to that next level if I was getting opportunities, which thankfully we have with the larger companies and stuff. So that's, I think, been a big challenge as a startup is getting to the level of the contacts we've got and the expectation of tech. What I thought was great, sort of 3 months into having the app, I still hadn't used a VR, virtual reality headset. So I didn't even, the developer was like, well, which VR headset? I'm like, well, I've never used one. So, and he was like, you're kidding me.
You're like, hang on, what are we doing here?
No, I get the concept. That's all. As a typical entrepreneur. So, there's been a lot of learning in that space. And I think then getting an investor on board was exciting. And then we obviously got to the next level of developer, but then there was little glitches in, little loops in the contract that I did have the other tech people look at, but there was things I didn't understand in terms of the data language, which proved to be difficult in the end. And there was an out for them on timeline. So they were 10 months late. And because of this little loop in the contract, we couldn't do much about it. So there's all these little things that you look at and go, wow, I should have known better than that, but then I didn't understand the language. So it's all of those things that have been really big learnings. And now we've got a great new development team and we've got some good user feedback. So we're just getting the app better and better in terms of the user experience. So it's at a good stage now, thankfully, but it's been a couple of, 18, 19 months of every weekend, every night. That's okay.
No, thanks so much for sharing that because I think it's really important, particularly for, you can draw parallels to, just like another startup and that it's not the end of the world if the thing doesn't work, right? Yes, that you learned so much from that meeting. Yes, you didn't want that to happen, right? You're not going, oh, that needed to happen in my life, potentially, but you learn a lot from it or whatever. But then you kept going because like you can't then bring everything back to you, like being a failure or whatever. It's not about that. It's actually about the product. It's about the business. And then you can move on there. And so thanks so much for sharing that, because as small businesses, as entrepreneurs, as people, we've all had those moments, I think. And sometimes you do give up and you don't go forward because you say, oh, it was a good idea, but this is telling me it's not for me or whatever. And there's so many moments like that. And I think you can draw that to smart communities as well, with local governments being like, oh, we've tried one thing and, we were burnt because, I don't know, we got some consultant in or whatever the case may be, or even we tried this technology and we expected it to do this, so now it doesn't do that or whatever. So then, okay, the whole thing's, we're not doing any of this anymore. And I think that's a real shame because there's so much opportunity and it's not just one thing or the other. So yeah, I think drawing those parallels is really important. So then we can actually go, okay, yes, this is a failure, not be scared of that, but then learn from that. And then what can we do differently next time? What can we do? And, potentially if you didn't have that experience, you may have got to even a higher level that you haven't had that negative experience where you go, oh, I actually have to make this decision. This isn't about them. This is about me going, no, I know what I need, even if I don't have the language, but having the, I don't know, even the, not even confidence, but just having that, I guess, level of going, no, this is about the business and how I want it to go. So even if I don't have the language, I'm still the one that's running this show.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like it's not about me even. It's about this is to help people. And so I'm just the one doing that, I'm the one delivering it, but it's not about my ego or, it's like just get out of my own way and this is what I feel I'm on the planet for. This is what I'm, to get wellness out to more people, and the tech is the way to do it. So it's not about that. It's like, okay, this is still on your purpose. Just get rid of all these problems and make it happen. So I think, yeah, I had you have the initial ego thing of, oh my God, it's humiliating. And then it was like, okay, bring a couple of friends to slap me around and move forward,
Drink some wine, you'll be fine. Yep.
Yeah. And people, the thing that I have seen in the tech space is people have been incredibly supportive. And I think that's been a really welcome surprise to me, the amount of people who, particularly even in this company, they were in high positions and they reached out to people they knew that would be at the level that was in our budget, that was still very well, respected, and helped me in a space I didn't know. So that's happened on a few occasions where people have really reached out and been supportive of small business and this space and tech. And it's an exciting space to be in for that reason. There's so much change and there's some really dynamic, highly exciting, like I'm loving the people I'm meeting through this work.
Yeah. And I guess they can see the potential of it, right? And they can see that I imagine they can feel how this isn't just like something you woke up and was like, oh, I'm going to do this thing and, I want to have a tech company and blah, blah, blah. They can feel that this is the reason why you're on the planet, to get this out to the world, to improve health and well-being across the globe. All those things, they can feel it, right? And so they know how important it is and that it will be able to work if you have the right support, if you have the right developer, if you get that advice. And so I think one, you know that you've got it when you get that, because you really, that potential is there, even if it didn't quite come off in that one time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there is, there's a real support of tech in Australia. I've been in small business my whole career, and I've pitched things many times before, and the reception hasn't been as positive as this. And that's what excites me, I think. I've had one other project that was as exciting 20 years ago. But I think when you've been in meetings and you know the difference, that's what's been exciting to me. I think the tech space people, particularly since COVID, are a lot more open to new technologies, and this is the direct, future direction. And particularly after that, I think that the whole smart cities concept has become even more topical, because it's like, well, we need tech to be working efficiently. We need the connection between everyone. It's even more important if we're in lockdown. How are all these systems communicating? Do we have the data? Do we know what's going on? And I think it's been that's one of the positives of a really negative pandemic situation. But it certainly, I think, has helped the conversation and opened many doors.
Okay, I want to shift to the future. But first, can you just explain your product, like as in what journey would I go on when I'm going to use your product?
Yes, sure. So when I think it's when you're in a product so much, I see it all day. I'm like, oh, do you know? I've seen it. You just don't think about what you're seeing all the time. But yeah, when you go into the app, it's pretty well you go in and say, how are you feeling? And then you say, and so it's like, how are you feeling? You select your emotional state, and then you select how you would like to feel. And then the app will recommend several like you've got a choice of 2 or 3 or 4 meditations that will pop up. And then there's the option, we've got sort of up to 35 scenes at the moment, and that's continuing to grow, to change your scenery. So if you're given a recommendation, you don't like it, you can change it. There's about 40 music tracks as well that you can change. And then there's 50 meditations. So it's pretty well prescriptive, and the option of having it fully manual. So you then go in and you're in this environment, you've got the music playing, you've got the positive suggestion.
So you put your headset on.
Yeah. So you put the headset on first up, you just say, you'll have a menu saying, how are you feeling? How would you like to feel? I'd like to feel like this. And then you link up your heart rate band, which then is recording it throughout. And then you do the meditation in whichever environment, whether that's in Uluru or whether that's in, like I'm seeing all these scenes in the Himalayas, or whether that's at the beach, or whether that's sitting on a lake in New Zealand, or wherever it is, you're in that environment, just listening to beautiful, relaxing music and hearing that positive affirmation. So it's like you go into another space. And then as you come out of the meditation, it'll then ask you how you feel at the end. So you've got that point of reference, and then it'll give you the report of your heart rate data. So your heart rate and heart rate variability measurements will come up on screen. So you can see, and the point of that as well is to not only give, your self-assessment, how do you think you feel? Because sometimes I find people when I teach the meditation, they think they've had a bad meditation, but actually the data shows that, no, you've actually had a really good meditation in terms of your state of your physiology and your brainwave state. So I wanted to have that data to give that education piece too, that just because you're having a negative emotion doesn't mean it's a bad meditation. It might just mean they're the emotions you needed to process. So that was another part of the app that it was really important in terms of that education piece.
And so then can you choose then to share that with your employer as well? Is that how this operates?
You get your own login with all the historic data, with all of your heart rate and every meditation and all of your averages and all those things. The employer gets group data only. If you choose to share your individual data, that's your private information. But obviously for privacy laws, we don't share individual data, no. Some of the sporting organisations have the privacy rights to look at stuff, so it's slightly different. But in companies, no, they just get an overall picture of staff so that there's privacy, because, it's important that people can go and say, I'm feeling down, and not worry that their boss is going to find out. You know what I mean? Things like that I think are very important. But the company will just get an overview, which gives them an indication of, your staff aren't stressed at all, or they are very stressed. And
you could see the changes too, potentially not potentially, you could see the changes if there's something impacting, then you go, oh, actually we're all feeling a different emotion now, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes useful for companies, I think, just to know that, this section of the company is highly stressed, or they're not, or what's happening. And so we need to do some training on this, or provide some sort of support in that group. So I think that's where it becomes very useful for companies as well. And it's still maintaining privacy for individuals, which I think is also really important.
Yeah, agreed, which is why I asked the question. So great answer. So I was kind of thinking about I guess if you choose, but the group. And I mean, that's what they need to be, I guess, thinking about, but also could indicate for individuals if they're not, they might feel stressed or whatever, but then when actually they're looking at the data, they're, I need to do something about this. Yes, the meditation's awesome, but then, if I'm not, maybe I do need to take another intervention. Maybe I need to go and talk to somebody or take a holiday or whatever the case may be. I think that's really important too.
Yeah, and I think another piece in it, Zoe, is that, high-performing athletes and high performers want to be able to recover quickly. So one of those pieces as well is to look at, okay, how quickly could I get my heart rate down? I came in at 160, I was really stressed. But initially when I started doing meditations, it was taking me 2 minutes to get my heart rate down. Now I'm getting it down in 30 seconds. Awesome. I'm getting some progress. And one of the other pieces is we've got smell as well. And so that link to smell and memory is also very useful. So you can't take a headset into a meeting, but if you repeatedly do a meditation with that smell, you can take the smell in. So you can smell that just going into your meeting, and the brain will trigger back to that response of relaxation from that meditation. So there's power in that multisensory approach. And I think from my point of view, smell's been really underutilized in this space. And it's a big part of what I'm also trying to communicate is, use everything we've got. And it can be a real advantage that a lot of people aren't using.
Yes. As somebody who does a lot of things not at the same time, I think I said this earlier in our pre-chat, but had to prioritize a lot of things. I find memory is something like I do certain things, particularly when I'm studying, and I'm still studying, and I think smell is one of those ones that, we don't use as often. Maybe it's used for different things, but I always found like the little tricks of, okay, well, I'm going to do this, then I've got my essential oils or whatever the case may be. And then like, oh, yes, that's right. Statistics is a peppermint smell.
Right. Yeah, this is exactly it. And I mean, good on you because you're already doing it. And I think it's just that for some people like you, it's a reminder. And for other people, it's quite new. They're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that, So I love the fact that you're already doing it. And so it's just, for you to just be like, okay, well, let's have a different smell for this or that, and it's just adding to that routine that you already have and enhancing it so that it's part of what you're already doing, but really linked to that relaxation piece. And it can be that, for your study in some of the meditations, we've got meditations around study.
Yeah, I was going to go there. Yeah.
Yeah, we do. And one of them is about having all the things you need for that exam or whatever. So there's exam and there's study, in that cloud and the smell linked to it. So you can go into your exam with that cloud of all the answers. So then it becomes that, neuroplasticity of repetitive thought processes of what it is you're trying to pull out and doing that repeatedly is where you're getting that high performing result.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we could talk for a long time, but I know we have to do other things today. But okay, let's zoom to the future and tell us about the emerging trends that people aren't talking about enough. I mean, I think we're talking about them right now, but anything else you want to add to the emerging trends?
Look, I think the exciting space for me, obviously, because I'm in VR, probably it's probably not being talked about, but it's just the artificial intelligence and the machine learning potentials of what we can create. And that's where we're headed with this as well, is that ability to be able to suggest things that we don't even know that are going to be good for us based on the data. And that's, to me, what smart cities are about as well. It's really being able to utilize that. And I guess that's not new, except that the technology is just advancing so quickly that I feel like it is new in the speed at which it's improving and becoming the potentials every week. I'm like, oh my God, you can do that now. And you can do, it's just growing and expanding. Like that to me is a really exciting space to be in, along with all the 5G technologies. And, it's got its advantages and disadvantages. 5G, I'm not totally sold on all levels, but one of the advantages is the speed of that information transfer and all of the potentials that's going to bring. And I think, there's a concern with all of it. We all want smart cities. We all want this convenience. We all want connectivity and all of those great things. The data security is also obviously the flip side to that. So I think that's something that I'm also watching and worrying about and hoping we get that balance right. And also that the energy discussion and environment and where are we pulling this energy from to power all of these things. And so I think it's a real balancing act in terms of this smart cities concept. And it's an exciting space to be in. The potentials are amazing if we do it right. So I'm just excited to be in this tech space, to be at least part of the conversation, to learn. And what I am loving is that, because once you're in the tech space, I'm in the wellness space. But as you were saying, there's so many different people from different industries coming into this space because it's the way of the future of cities. There's sort of, I think I read somewhere, was it 55% of populations are in cities, 54, I think, now. And they're saying by 2050, it'll be like 66 of the people worldwide are in cities. Like 66% is pretty high. So it's the only way we're going to be able to jam in and all survive and function normally is to get this stuff right. So I think it's a pretty exciting space to be in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in this space, I mean, it has to be the future because technology is not going away. It's there more and more. And like you were talking about, we have to get the balance right, which is why we need more people in the conversation that care about wellness, that care about, the human beings, that aren't just in it to, big tech companies or whatever the case may be. And that's why I feel like we need more voices in the convo that come from different areas because they bring different perspectives and you won't know everything. No one knows everything about, absolutely all of the different areas. And that's why we need more people in the conversation. We need government in the conversation, which they're in the conversation, they're coming. But we also need corporates in the conversation as well because they affect so many people's lives. And I think that's a real key. It's not just about the cities and the infrastructure. It's actually about all these other players that come into it as well.
Yeah. And I think I have to say government is incredibly supportive in the tech space. I've been amazed, having come from health and wellness and fitness, tech space, and getting a lot more support, which is exciting. But they're very much on the page of this is what we need in innovation. And that's what I'm loving, is getting involved in some of these initiatives and these accelerator programs and stuff where I'm meeting people, as you're saying, in different areas, because that's where I'm also getting some of the new ideas, as you say, because it's like, oh, hold on, that I've never thought of anything that way. You think totally differently to me. And then it's like, how can I apply some of that into ours? And that's when you start getting some really great innovation. I think I'm really excited at the stuff that's available in Australia and internationally. You know, we're talking internationally in some company with Singapore at the moment on one of their accelerator programs. And it's, I think when all of the international cities and smart cities come together as well, there's potential there. And that's what excites me about the tech space, which is something I wasn't aware was going to be an option. And it's a really pleasant and a really exciting space. And it's what gets me excited. It's what gets me, because, the wellness I've always been passionate about, but it's been a surprise to me how much I'm really enjoying the tech space.
Love it. Love it. Edwina, it's been so great to chat with you. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. We'll just finish off with, how can people connect with you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, LinkedIn's probably good for me, Edwina Griffin, and our app is the AtOne app, and alternatively email, so edwina@atoneapp.com.
Excellent. And we'll put all those links in the show notes so people can click away and find you. Thank you again for coming onto the Smart Community podcast, and I am so excited to follow along where you go next.
Thank you so much for having me. Look forward to chatting again. Thanks, Zoe.
Bye.
Bye.
The Smart Community podcast is brought to you by My Smart Community. If you're looking for support in podcast strategy and production, workshop design and facilitation, or communication and media advisory, get in touch. Email hello@mysmart.community or head to www.mysmart.community.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes are available on our website, mysmart.community/podcast. If you have any questions for us or any of our guests, you can email hello@mysmart.community. You can also find us on the socials. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter @SmartComHQ. That's com with 2 M's. If you are enjoying the podcast, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we would love for you to leave us a rating and review at wherever you listen. This really helps us reach more ears and eyes, so thank you for your support. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.